Welcome back to Arena Contest here. It's Flanks06 doing a video on class overview. So this video is focused on giving you a real high-level view on all of our 8 classes currently in the game. The 9th one that is coming, and then the mixed ones at the end. And I'm going to start off by just kind of giving a little quick blurb on each of the classes if that's what you're here for. And then I'm going to go in a little bit more detail on each of the heroes within that class. If you would like to know more about each of the heroes and all of their abilities and kind of the pros and cons of that character, then make sure to check out my class spotlight videos where I go in deep detail on that. This one is definitely more high-level focus, get you playing characters and knowing what to expect. All right, so let's start off. What is a class? What makes up a class? So in Arena the Contest, a class is made up of stats that you see on the left here with hit points, base attack, defense, movement. All the heroes within that class share those same stats. They also share a passive ability that you'll see here, for example, with the brutes, brutality, where there's a trigger condition and then they do damage based on that trigger condition. So they all share those, and then they all share whether they are kind of a ranged or melee. There's some variation within each of the heroes and classes, but basically the same idea is most of them are going to follow the same types of rules. So like the brutes, for example, all going to be melee heroes. And then the themes is exactly what they share. So we'll get in here more, but characters that do specifically damage or healing or soaking up damage. So Dragori does have a defined types that they came up with after actually this came up. But basically there's 4 types. So there's the Striker, main source of damage, concentrated damage. That's brutes or shooters. Specialists, the main source of debuffs and split damage. That's tactician or controllers. Defenders, the main source of defense and counters. Tank or bruisers. And then support, and that is the main source of healing and buffs. So that will be the healer or the commander class, which is coming out with Tanares Adventures. All right, so let's jump into our first class here. That is the brutes. They are melee fighters with very high damage potential, and they get increased damage while being away from allies. The next class is the tacticians. They are melee fighters that can apply powerful debuffs to the enemy team, and they do increased damage when attacking enemies near allies. The tanks are melee fighters with strong defensive abilities that can also cause additional damage when enemies don't attack them. Healers are ranged spellcasters with powerful healing and supportive buffs for your allies and can provide additional healing when hitting with attacks. One other thing to note about healers do a lot better in the normal quests of the game. If you're going to do a boss match, like against one of the dragons, then they are not as useful because a lot of the boss fights, they do so much damage that a healer doesn't help quite as much. So sometimes getting that extra damage is more important than getting some healing. So just keep that in mind. The shooters are ranged spellcasters with very high damage potential. They can also damage multiple enemies at the same time, and they have increased damage while being far away from the enemy. Controllers. The controllers are ranged spellcasters that can apply many powerful debuffs and effects to enemies, and they can also damage a second target if positioned close enough. So the bruisers are melee fighters with a lot of versatility to soak up some damage and deal damage when attacked. They're definitely best class to kind of fill any team composition out there because they are very, very versatile. The last class that actually isn't listed in the compendium here is the special class, which is made up of 3 heroes instead of 4 like the rest of the classes. They are all a mix of melee and ranged ability heroes with no stats or passives that are shared, and definitely not recommended for starting characters, partially because that some of their abilities and things that they have kind of screw up how even the core campaign works, but they work a little bit better in PvP, but they're definitely not recommended for starting out. The next class would be the commanders, which we actually, don't know about yet. All we know is from update 18. That gives us some insight as to kind of what they do. So it'll be definitely more healing and supportive focused. So the Pegasus, for example, buffs the Valkyrie's protection and provides some additional movement abilities. Orthus, the Hellhound, which is the Warlock, can damage his Hellhound to make his attacks more powerful. The Hellhound attacks multiple targets. And we got Colette and the Mummy. The Summoner's Mummy can debuff enemies in different ways according to their proximity instead of attacking. And then Ogmir, the Beast, and with the Beast Master can only make basic attacks, requiring the Beast to make primary or special attacks. And then lastly, we got multi-class heroes, which is mostly made up of the crossover heroes, although there is some of the RPG heroes that are multi-class. So basically the idea is they'll share something of stats with one and then passive of a different and a mix, but we still don't really know a lot about that. Last that was information that was given up on that was update 35. Okay, so if you're wanting to stick around here for more detailed examination of each hero, and I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just going to give you the top level here. So going back to the brutes, those melee fighters, the high damage potential. So we got Qatar. Qatar is first. He's the easiest of all the brutes. He can reduce damage to increase his chance to hit, and he does a pretty decent amount of damage. All right, moving on to Cedric. Does increase damage below 35 hit points. He has an extremely high damage potential, but only in the right situations. We got Merlot, the Minotaur. He has the best mobility of all the brutes. He can damage himself for increased damage. He is also probably one of the hardest to maximize his damage just because it does require so much positioning. We got Count Blake. He is the most defensive of all the brute characters. He can control an enemy to do additional damage to the enemy team, and he has healing abilities. All right, going to the Tacticians. So the Tactician, Rokaru, can damage multiple enemies, can use his passive to heal or damage other enemies, and he is probably the most straightforward Tactician. So pretty good one to pick up for your starting game. We got Garen here. So Garen can remove specials or copy attacks. He can do massive amounts of damage when he is positioned well. He is a little bit more focused for PvP than he is for PvE, so keep that in mind that he might be a little more challenging if you plan to use him in the campaign. All right, then we got Mir. Mir can do a lot of damage to a single target and prevent that target from healing. She also does strong. She also has a strong damage over time effect. Lastly, we have Liana. She can make a basic attack after receiving damage. She can do a lot of damage to the enemy team if positioned well with a lot of her different abilities. And then she can strip permanent effects from enemies that are within range. All right, moving on to the tanks. So the tanks are real good soaking up damage, protecting allies. Rurik, the tank, Is the most defensive hero of all the tanks. He can prevent all damage for 1 turn and can increase the range of his passive power. Drana, the most offensive of all of the tanks. She can perform a basic attack at the end of every turn, can damage multiple enemies at the same time, and she is definitely the best tank for doing a lot of damage. Then moving on to Sir Eric. Sir Eric, the only tank with healing. He can sacrifice some of his health to prevent damage or provide healing. His healing can be underwhelming, though, especially when compared to some of the other heroes. Then we got Nacrel, the Death Knight. He can prevent healing in an area around himself. He has a strong ranged attack and has the most movement-related abilities of all the tanks. The healers. So Tarim has the most powerful heals out of the entire class. He can interrupt an enemy to save an ally's life. He also has a pretty strong permanent effect. All right, then we got Talia. Talia is the only healer with a resurrection ability. Very strong effects to buff and defend allies. I'd say she's the most versatile hero for any kind of situation for PvE or PvP. So a very good healer to start with there. All right, we got Ustar next. He is the most damage-focused healer. He can use his dead allies' abilities as his attacks, and he's the only healer who actually isn't very supportive. He mostly just kind of does damage and inflicts conditions on the enemy. All right, last but not least, we have Jade the Bard here. Jade is the healer with the best supportive movement abilities. She can permanently provide any beneficial condition to an ally that is permanent. So very strong healer there with that effect. The shooters. So back to the shooters here. Neri has a lot of versatility to attack one target or many and can do a tremendous amount of damage with key positioning. She is the easiest shooter to do a lot of damage with. Next up is Avalon, the best shooter for area of effects attacks that can also move enemies, and he can also interrupt enemies to move unimpeded. Next up we have Zanuck here. Zanuck is the best single target shooter, does huge single target damage, and he's probably one of the easiest to play because he is so straightforward and just does pure damage to one target mostly. And last but not least, we got Juliet, the Ice Sorceress. She is the most consistent damage shooter, and she can divide damage to maximize her damage potential between multiple enemies. All right, moving on to the controllers. So Katarina here can make enemies more likely to miss and take damage from it. She can swap hit points between herself or allies and the enemies. Next up, we have Zafara, the only controller with healing that can permanently make the enemy miss more often and has the strongest resurrection skill in the game. Zund. So Zund can prevent the enemy from healing and force the enemy to choose between taking damage or not making an attack. He can also strip an enemy of a powerful condition. All right, then we got Alarine. Alarine is the best PvP focused hero in the game. She's really not very strong at all in PvE. She can control the enemy to use their abilities against their own team. And she is very weak without allies or having more than one enemy to attack. All right, let's go on to Venaris. Venaris of the Bruisers. Venaris has the most damage. He's the most damage-focused bruiser with the ability to execute an enemy and do massive damage to another, and can strategically position the enemy team to set up attacks for your team. He is very much considered a striker of the bruiser class. Renkier. the best hero to negate bad rolls, and he has the most varied abilities of all the bruisers. He is the only bruiser with a resurrection ability. He would be considered a defender hero. Askren, he can quickly give out a lot of healing to allies at the cost of his own health, and he can give a very strong permanent effect to an ally. He's very much a supportive style character. And then last for the bruisers, we have Horus. Horus can move a lot to damage multiple enemies, and he can take quite a bit of punishment, but he can also remove many powerful effects from multiple enemies. All right, moving into the special class. So Haran is the shapeshifter. He can copy the abilities of his enemies and can apply any condition on any combatant and be any other class that is not already on your team. We have the Faceless Emperor here. The Faceless Emperor can summon a tiger companion that can do damage. He can damage the tiger to do even more damage for himself, and he can heal or also do damage to enemies. His special passive is that he can copy enemies' passives. All right, then we got Talessa, the Dragon Queen. She has a powerful aura that changes every turn and can be modified to hinder enemies or strengthen yourself. She has a strong permanent effect to make reaction attacks at range and can do a decent amount of AoE damage. There could be additional specials in the future, considering Tanares Adventures campaign unlocked some other heroes that we haven't seen anything about. So it's possible that there could be more added to this specific class, which almost really isn't even a class because they're all very unique and different in their own, and they don't share anything else in common. So that is pretty much it for my update. I hope that was helpful to you. If you have any questions, make sure to drop it below in the comments. Check out my social media links in there as well, including our Discord server. If you enjoyed this, make sure to give me a like, subscribe, and definitely share with your friends, families, or other board game players out there that want to enjoy some Arena of the Contest content. And we'll see you at the next one.